Good evening, everybody. So, I am here today for another episode of Coffee with Friends where we may discuss trauma of all sorts to include all types of abuse. Viewers and listeners may find it unsettling and triggering. The guests on our live streams reflect a diverse set of values, morals, and ethics that may not reflect the morals, values, and ethics of the Misfit Amish. If this live stream causes you distress, please seek support from your trusted folks and qualified mental health professionals as needed. Also, please cease listening until you are able to listen again. With that being said, I'd like to welcome Ada to Coffee with Friends. Good evening, Ada.
Good evening. How are you?
Well, I'm here with my fabulous cup. You know, somebody gifted me this cup last year and I kind of love it. So that's where I am. I'm great. How about you?
What does it say on it?
F this shit. Mm.
I'm doing good. I'm doing all right today. It's been a beautiful day here.
Yeah.
Yep, sunshine shined all day long.
Can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Like, where did you grow up and where did you come from?
Sure. Um, I grew up a little bit all over the place. Um, I was born in Kentucky. My parents originally come from the Schwarzentrooper Amish, and I'm the youngest of 13, so I was born quite a bit behind all the rest, actually, like 6.5 years behind all the rest.
Oh,
So
wow.
they had 12 kids, and then 6.5 years later, I was kind of a surprise
So you
from,
just came dancing in at the end, like, hello, surprise.
it took them a while to get the right one.
Oh, that's the story?
That's
Yeah.
the story I'm sticking with. I don't know.
Does it help you sleep at night? Because I feel like it might, and that's okay.
Not really. I don't really think about it. But
Okay.
yeah, when I was born, they lived in Kentucky, and I mean, we weren't a part of an Amish church, but we lived the Amish life. Like, we were actually stricter than probably any of the Amish that I know. I don't know any Amish that were as strict as what we were. Um,
Do you think that's because your parents were like Schwarzentrooper Amish?
well, my dad left the Schwarzentrooper church because the story that I always heard was that he did not agree with their courtship rules, and they were using the phone in vehicles too much. Like, he did not want to use any vehicles or any phones whatsoever.
Wait,
And
so y'all didn't use any phones or like you weren't allowed to have vehicles, like
we did not allow to have drivers.
not even drivers.
No, not unless it was life or death. And I can remember of one time in my life that we used a vehicle to go to the doctor because I needed to go pretty bad. And he really didn't want to do it that time.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, you had to be really, really bad off before he would do that.
Fair enough.
Um, his thing was to make himself look as different from the world as he possibly could.
Because we are not of the world, maybe.
Yeah, I always had a hard time understanding his philosophy or his belief, but
Well,
he was definitely a different dude.
that's sounds like a really, really different type of lifestyle. Like, even though like your parents were not like necessarily in an Amish church, like they were still like living a separate, more isolated life than, and even like a different culture. So like how did that like affect you as a kid? Like, did y'all go to public school? How where did you get your education from?
Education.
What's that, right? What is education?
I don't know. Um, when I was born, we lived in Kentucky till I was 10 years old. And
Okay.
while we lived in Kentucky, we were taught by my sister, my oldest sister. Um, and God bless her, she did the best that she could.
Mhm.
Um, she only got the education that she was able to get, so it was basically the basics, you know.
Yeah.
And then whenever I went to Tennessee, we moved to Tennessee when I was 10. And when we moved to Tennessee, there was a Amish community down there that we joined. Well, I say Amish community loosely. It was different. They don't associate with any other Amish community.
Okay.
And so we were down there. I moved down there at the age of 10, and they had a schoolhouse. And Dad actually allowed me to go to school there. Um, Dad and Mom did not go to church in that church, but some of the brothers and sisters did, even though they weren't supposed to. They were old enough to kind of do what they wanted to do. But he
So
did
that
allow me to go to school there. And I should have actually been, when I went to school there, I was in second grade at age 10.
Oh, wow.
That's what I equaled up. That's what it ended up. And
Mhm.
I don't remember what I actually should have been in
I mean, like,
and
isn't
what
it
grade I should have been.
isn't a 10-year-old in like 4th grade or something like that?
It was fourth or fifth grade that I should have been.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would
I was way.
imagine.
I was in second grade. As you can imagine, that was pretty embarrassing, but I was
I
just kind of grateful to actually be around kids. I had not been around any kids that my whole life,
Oh,
other
wow.
than other than the people that came to visit us. And we raised a lot of produce, and Mom did a lot of baking. And in the wintertime, we had a butcher house, and we butchered pigs, and sometimes we'd butcher cows for people, mostly pigs. And because we were the only plain family in that area, I mean, people would come to get their stuff, and I was this little tiny little Amish girl walking around, and they were, I got a little spoiled, so I did get to see people, but I wasn't a lot, I didn't have friends, or there was no other Amish kids around or anything like that. So to be able to actually associate with other kids was like, wow, this is cool.
You got Did you get to have friends finally?
Yeah. Yeah, I got to finally have some friends, and that's actually kind of why we moved to Tennessee, because where we lived, all of my brothers and sisters were leaving home,
Mhm.
and Dad decided that maybe, I think he thought maybe he could save the family if he moved to Lobelville, which was an area where there was other families, and a few of them had already left and went to that area. So I think he thought, well, maybe if I go down there where the kids can have some friends, that maybe that'll save and keep them home. It didn't, but
Yeah,
I think that was his hope.
gotcha. Well, that's interesting. We do have somebody named Mac who says, "Hello, Ada. I finally found y'all. I mean, I found y'all. Okay. Do you know a
Hi,
Mac?"
Matt.
And
How are you
then,
doing? But yeah,
uh,
I was actually talking earlier when I was taking some Amish people home. We were talking about toys. We got talking about toys, and it made me realize that I didn't have any toys growing up that I was given by my parents.
wow.
And I don't say that part, to badmouth anybody. It just kind of came to me, and I was like, I had a few toys, but they were given to me. And I don't ever remember, because we didn't celebrate birthdays. There was no birthdays, there was no holidays celebrated. Um,
So,
there
like,
was no This truck is pulling in here next to me. But yeah, so I don't ever remember them actually buying any toys.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, so like even like typically like in like my older Amish communities and even in the Ape Troyer community that I lived in, like there were there were still toys for the little kids, like the really little kids.
Yeah,
Like I had a boat and um yes, it was a faceless bull, but I at least had a book. Like that was like I at least had that. And like there were some other toys that we would have too. Like I remember Lincoln Logs and other wooden toys like a marble roller and stuff like that. Like but some of it did come from our parents. So I think you're right when you say like your dad, he was definitely a little different, I guess. Yeah, Susie says, yes, your dad was a different guy.
yeah, that's my cousin, or she's married to my cousin.
Oh, gotcha. Hi, Susie. And Marlene says in PA, being 10 in second grade isn't too unusual, as up until recently, you didn't have to start elementary until age 8. This law changed recently. Well, in the 3 Amish schools I went to in PA, no, I lied, 4 Amish schools I went to in PA, um, at age 10, I would have been in fourth and fifth grade. So, I mean, I think
Yeah,
maybe it also depends on communities too.
yeah,
So,
yeah, it definitely does.
so
Um,
I go ahead.
but just to add to that a little bit, I do have my GED. So
Good for
I did
you.
go do that, and I went to college for a year. Actually, it was a little bit over a year, and I got a community college,
Mm-hmm.
and I did the work. I got a diploma in accounting and in, man, my brain just went dead. What was the other one? I was going,
You were going.
wow.
What were you going to school for?
Sometimes I just, my brain just fails me. But anyways, I was going for one thing and I ended up doing the work for two different things. So I got two diplomas in the amount of time that I had to do one.
That's amazing, Ada. Mose says, "Hey, you all. I'm listening. Hi, Mose.
Hi,
Welcome."
Mose.
So, anyways, so like now you're in a place where you drive people, right? Is it
Yeah.
okay to talk about that a little bit and like why we're talking today?
Um, yeah, I moved, well, I left home at 17.
Oh,
Um, we lived in Ohio at that time. And I moved in with a guy that I found him in the newspaper. I was looking my vet. I had started to clean house for this lady, and my dad didn't like it because I was using her electric things to clean her house, and that was a no-no because we could not use electricity. So he gave me an option: either move out or quit the job. Those were my two options. And I was 17 and I was not happy with where I was. I was not happy with myself. I was not happy with life. I was miserable. I was a miserable human being. And I knew I needed a change and I knew it was time to go. And so I um, started looking in the newspaper. I didn't know what to do. I had really never really used the phone. I just started looking in the newspaper for somebody that was looking for somebody to come work for them. And I found this ad for this guy that had his wife had died of cancer and he had 4 kids. And I he had a phone number. He was looking for a live-in nanny. And so late one night after dark, I walked up the road. Um, there was a phone shack up the road from where we lived. And I walked up the road. I knew the neighbors could use it, but I had absolutely no clue how to use a phone. I mean, I had never dialed a phone number. And I'm like, I got to figure this out. So I did. I called him and he hired me on the spot.
Dude, like,
And
I hear you talking, and I'm just like, you were more sheltered than I was as an Amish 17-year-old.
yeah, I mean, I was in ways, yes. And in other ways, a lot of the family had already left the Amish. So, or left I use that when I talk about us being Amish. I was so used to us talking about ourselves in an Amish because that's the way we lived. So I use that in a loose term as far as even though we weren't a part of a church, it's just the way we lived or whatever. But yeah, so a lot of them had already left. So, and they would come back home and visit sometimes. So I did have some ideas of things, but as far as I hadn't really done anything. And I walked up the road and I figured it out and I called him and he hired me. And that Sunday, I called my cousin to see if she could pick me up. I sat dad and mom down the night before and told them I was leaving. And I was with
Mhm.
him for like a year. And then my sister came up, moved me down to Tennessee. I lived down there for like around 17 so years, had two kids, and ended up moving back up here in 2013. And when I moved back up here, I was a single mom. I had two kids, and I didn't have a job up here. I did have a house to move into. I had got that taken care of. And so we moved up here. And a friend of mine had advertised in the newspaper for Amish driving for taxi service
Mhm.
because that's what she does. And so I figured, I had a minivan. At least I could start out doing that. I needed something right away to start on.
Right.
And so when I moved up here, um, she started giving me a few trips, and it was 2 weeks later I had my first work route. I also started an office job at the same time. For the first several years I lived up here, I worked in an office, but yeah, that was kind of when I started hauling Amish, and I've been doing it for almost 10. June will be 10 years.
Oh, wow. That's
And
a
so right now I run 3 work routes, and that's pretty much all I do. I do some in between, but I don't do a whole lot of shopping trips and stuff. I stay busy with my work routes. And
well, work routes are kind of a lot. I mean, like, so here's another question for you that I didn't think of earlier because that's really interesting. So now you drive for Amish people. Like, what language did y'all speak in your home?
Dutch, same as the Amish.
Okay, so even though like maybe you didn't attend Amish church, like yours, like are you aware that there's actually like a higher occurrence of certain like genetic disorders with people of Amish ancestry?
Yeah, I've heard some of that already.
There's a whole database out there if you didn't know that. And there's actually like Amish specific genetic disorders, by the way.
Really? Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't. I guess I didn't
Yes.
really know that.
There's one with our last name, by the way.
What's that?
Byler liver disease.
Really?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I know
I
our
just
fam.
go ahead.
Our fam. Go ahead.
You're good.
I was just gonna say I know our family has enough health issues anyway. So, but liver's
Yeah.
not one of them though.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was interesting when I realized that, but anyways, regardless, like part of the reason that we wanted to have a conversation today is because people often wonder like what is going on or like how can we prevent child abuse and how can we prevent child sexual abuse. April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. It's also Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So, I mean, just off of the top of your head, do you have anything you can think of that maybe could benefit people when it comes to like preventing child abuse?
Well, the home that I grew up in, we definitely had that issue in our house. Um, I think that there is so much emphasis. Now I can't talk. Say the word for me, Mary.
Emphasis?
Emphasis. That's right. Put on being quiet and not being allowed to speak. And I think as a whole, as people, we need to become more comfortable in speaking about it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know it's a subject that's hard to talk about, and it's uncomfortable, and but if we can become more comfortable in talking about it, our children can become more comfortable in opening up to us. I know myself as a mother, I can talk about this because my daughter would not mind. Um, my son's father abused my daughter, and just talking to them and checking on them and making sure that our children are aware of what's out there and being open with them. I mean, I never, with my kids, I was always, I would talk to them about things, I didn't hide things from them. I didn't, as far as like growing up, we weren't allowed to talk about anything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we weren't allowed to even talk about, that time of the month.
Yeah.
And when you keep these things from children, it makes them, I mean, my opinion of it is that it makes them feel like it's a bad thing. And and
Well,
yeah.
I may I?
Yes, please.
So one, when there is silence around things that are normal, like things, like for example, if like so for me, like I don't know about you, but in Pennsylvania Dutch, I didn't have words for my private body parts. So one, I couldn't communicate appropriately, and I said somebody, you know, it's below the stomach, or it's my stomach. I said my stomach hurt,
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't either.
or things like that. And so that's a way, like if you teach your children appropriate body parts,
Right.
that's one of the big things, is you're giving them language to describe what is happening to them. If you teach your children and if you don't have words in your language for it, use English. I mean, something.
Yeah.
They there's got to be a way for children to communicate, but also what Ada was saying about being open. I will tell you that I have one of the proudest moments in my life is when my child is sitting with another child, and all I hear from my child is, I did not consent to that. Do not do that. Like that means that I've done something right, because they're able to verbalize, I didn't consent to that. I don't want that. And I
Yeah.
think that teaching our kids bodily autonomy starts when they're very young. And it starts by like teaching them that their voice matters.
Yes.
And their voice
Absolutely.
matters even when they're 5 years old and they say, I don't want to hug Uncle Joe.
Yep.
I don't want to be around Aunt Susie. I
Can we please not use that name again?
I'm sorry. I don't want to be around Aunt Jemima. But
No, not that one. I'm talking about the first one you said.
oh, my bad. I okay. I won't use that name. But like, if your kid says, I don't want to be around uncle, I don't want to be around aunt, I don't want to be around cousin, like, be curious.
Well,
Ask,
as a parent, we can kind of, I mean, we should
yeah,
be able to kind of know if they say that, there's probably a reason,
there's a reason why. And
because most children don't just say that without a reason.
no. And as Mo says, I have a lady sitting close by that's listening that was sexually abused by her older brother. And the crazy part is she got spanked for it. Me too, Mose.
Yeah, me too.
And And I'm so sorry that happened to you. You did not deserve that. That is not right. It is inherently blaming you for being sexually abused when you get spanked for it.
Yep.
And it's not okay. No child deserves that. Nobody deserves that. And no child asks for that.
Yep. Yeah, that,
Yeah. But going back to like how we teach our children, when we teach our children like bodily autonomy and consent, when our kids say no, we respect that. We don't force our kids to give us hugs. We wouldn't like that as adults. Why do we treat our kids that way?
yeah, absolutely.
Like, and another thing is so I was looking on a website and I was looking at a couple different points that were brought up in regards to, it's by the Washington State Department of Children, Youth and Families. And one of the things they say is like get involved with like, volunteering your time with other parents, help vulnerable children. How do you help vulnerable children?
Well, you first of all, you don't worry about putting yourself in the middle of something. If you see somebody in harm or if you see harm being done, then it's time to step in.
May I share something slightly disturbing?
Sure.
One of the big things about my cases is that after I had reported and they were arrested, and for those who are unfamiliar, I reported it after I escaped, and there were 5 people in my immediate family arrested: 3 of my brothers, and my stepfather, and my biological mother. One of the neighbors invites me over for dinner and says to me, "Well, I saw you that one day, and I really thought something was going on. But you have to understand, we have to preserve our business relationships with the Amish community here."
Yep, that's the problem.
Number 2, when I was a small child, I had things going on that shouldn't have been happening, and I was taken to an actual medical doctor. And they did what I know now as an adult and as somebody who has worked in medical since 2005, was they did the questionnaire. And because I didn't speak English well enough, they brought in my egg donor to translate for me. And she lied to them. When I said yes, she told them no. And then she told me to be silent. Number 3, about a year ago, maybe, when Sins of the Amish came out, another neighbor kid from when I was even younger, and this would have been when my biological father was still alive because he died when I was 5, um, told me that her mother just didn't know what to do, but she always talked about how much she knew that there was abuse going on in that home. So if you don't know what to do, intervene, report it,
Yes.
something. Because how many more children are like that out there? Because everybody says, well, I just don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. Well, and I've even heard this one. I didn't know that Amish people, I can report that to Children Youth Services.
Oh, geez.
Let me tell you that I don't care what community it's in. If you see a child being abused and you do nothing,
You're just
I'd
as
ask
bad.
you, I'd ask you, what kind of a person are you that you can sit there and justify not doing anything?
Amen.
It is awful, and you don't do that. One of our listeners says, sounds like your neighbor was seeking absolution. Yeah, absolutely. Like, and I'm not giving them absolution. I will talk about that as much as I need to, because I need people to understand that when it comes to child abuse happens inside of groups of people. Nobody is exempt.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
See, I didn't
go ahead.
talk to anybody about it until after I left home. I mean, there, I'm sure as far as there is nobody that would have known other than within the family.
Yeah.
But I didn't have, I mean, it was not talked about. I mean, I had nobody to talk to. I mean, I remember I could not tell you when I started getting sexually abused. It was as far back. I mean, it's some of my very first memories as a little girl, and all the way up to I don't know, 11, 12, probably maybe 12 or 13 actually. I think it was.
That's absolutely awful. Thank you for
And
sharing that.
I mean, when I was younger, at the younger age, it was much more often. But yeah, there was nobody. There was not a single soul to go to. I had zero people that I could talk to about it. And I don't remember talking to anybody about it until I left home. And I'm not even sure exactly how long after I left home that I actually talked to somebody about it. Um,
Did you did you even have words for it?
I mean, after I left home and I mean, I always knew that it was wrong because I got spanked for it a couple times. It wasn't I didn't get if we got caught, I got spanked. And I was always a little tiny girl and they were a lot bigger than me. I mean, we're talking about, you know,
Yeah.
in their teens and up.
Yeah.
And I never could figure out why I was getting my hind end whooped because I was tiny. I mean, we're talking about 3, 4, 5, 6 years old that I remember that happening. Um,
It wasn't your fault. And you didn't deserve that, and you most certainly didn't deserve that the spankings to being caught. I know this is hard for many people to listen to, but understand that this is what Ada lives with.
I mean, I guess I never dealt with it. I always just thought I was okay. I, I I don't know. I guess I stuffed it down and I just assumed I was all right.
Denial is a very powerful coping skill, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And it wasn't until a few years ago that it came back to haunt me. I mean, and I've realized since then, over the last 3 or 4 years, I've been doing some counseling and stuff, and I've learned a lot about myself. And I've realized that a lot of the choices that I made as in my younger years, the men that I chose to be with that also abused me was because I never dealt. I'm sorry, guys. I'm a little bit emotional.
you don't have to talk about this if you don't want to, Ada. You don't
No,
have.
it's okay. I mean, I don't mind.
I
If my
mean,
story can help one person,
yeah,
then then I've done one thing good in my life. I mean, my message. I think that I want people to, if you have children that have been through these things, get them help.
that part. Get them help.
Don't wait until they're grown and it comes
Mhm.
back to haunt them. Um, my daughter, like I said, my daughter was abused, and I put her into counseling, and I went through it with her, and she's awesome. And now, when I think about it, if I would have had the help that she had back when I was younger, and if I would have thought about it when I left home and gotten help, but yeah, if you have children that go through these things by whoever that it happens by, they need help more than I mean, and more than we can give them as parents. It doesn't matter how good of a parent we are. They
Yeah,
might not need help for long, just it's they need help.
yeah.
Letting them talk to someone else helps.
Well, and truthfully, like I would even go so far as to say, like, if your child has experienced trauma, go find them a licensed, qualified trauma therapist, somebody who specializes in trauma,
Yes,
because a
absolutely.
regular counselor doesn't necessarily have the knowledge to
Yes,
be able to work with children that have experienced trauma like that. And
absolutely.
one of our listeners says, Ada, our hearts go out to you, and we understand as yes, as you are not alone. And another one says, totally understandable, holding safe space for you as you process this.
Thank you guys. Appreciate y'all.
And then somebody did ask this, but feel free to not answer it if you don't want to. I typically feel like people walk a journey after trauma. It's not necessarily something that goes away for many people, especially when it's repetitive childhood trauma during our stages of development. It can be like it causes neurobiological changes in the brain. And so it's really up to you if you want to answer the question, have you dealt with it now?
I'm still dealing with it. I'm in a better place than I was at one time, but no, not everything. I mean, I suffer from PTSD. I deal with nightmares and I deal with crap.
Yeah, it's something you live with, it's something you learn coping skills with. Is that
Exactly.
correct? It's
Yes.
it's something that when you think it's gotten better and you think you've worked through all of your trauma, one day you're at work or you're at the grocery store and somebody does something and you're back there and you're reliving that.
And you constantly, I mean, just, it's a process. You have days when it's just you're depressed and you you don't feel like you're good enough.
Yep, that's what it teaches you when you experience that much trauma as a kid.
And
So,
something, as a little girl, and this is something I have been really hard on myself about as I've gotten older, is the choices that I made in men for the fathers for my children, because um neither one of them had a father that was, my daughter's dad, he never wanted to be in her life. He was never, and that's a whole nother thing. My son's dad is an abuser, and I was hard on myself about that. Like, how could I ever give these children a father like this? Because they deserve to have a father. And I seen them pay for the fact that they haven't had a dad in their lives. And so I was really hard on myself. And I have learned through going through counseling that I had no idea how to choose a man.
we had this thing
I mean,
when
I had literally, and I still to this day, I struggle with feeling like I've never been loved by a man.
that sounds horribly like alienating and isolating. I'm so sorry, Ada. Do you believe that you deserve love despite the trauma?
I mean, my dad, he was not a good guy. And, I mean, I do believe that there was some sort of a peace found at the end. And he did change a lot in the later years. And I don't say that to make excuses for him. Please don't take it like that. I just, he was not a good guy. And there was no direction in how you go about growing up. There was no direction in how you go about finding a mate or what you should look for, or there was no,
What are red flags?
yeah, what are red flags? And there was no, love yourself. There was no love yourself.
That
We
can really
have to
make it.
teach our children to love themselves. And
Yep.
when you don't teach them that, how are they supposed, you know what I mean? Like,
Yep. So, are you saying that when we don't teach our children that love is um, something that is like repetitive. It's repeatedly shown through acts and words and deeds that show your children that you love them. When we don't do that, are we invalidating our children's existence, and are we teaching them that love can be weaponized? How do we look at and define love when our only idea of love is that love is pain
Right.
or that love hurts?
Right. Exactly.
Are we like, if we teach our children we hit you because we love you, are we teaching them that love is pain? Um, and I think that's a really important point, actually, Ada. Thank you for bringing that up. And also, we love you here, and our listeners love you here, and then we want you to know that
Well, thank
you
you.
are valued, and thank you for your voice. Your voice means a lot. So we do have another question. This comment is kind of long. So often people will realize something is wrong but have nothing specific to report. I think this actually happened with the child selling case, the child gifting case. Is that what you're talking about, Rachel? Um, where a neighbor reported it, but it didn't get investigated because there wasn't enough of info. So, how does one report when it's just that gut feeling combined with things that really aren't significant enough to give any probable cause? The thing is they tried reporting it, so they at least tried doing something, even if it didn't get investigated. They
Yeah.
cared enough to try,
Yeah.
at least try,
And it
even
is,
though
it's frustrating because sometimes you try and you get nowhere.
you really do. And I'm not sure what we were talking about, but Susie says, yes, I have learned so much with that. Kathy says, I'm so sorry, Ada, that this has happened to you. Love you. I've seen a lot of this from fostering children. That is, yeah. Horse therapy is great. I've never done horse therapy. I have done a variety of other therapies.
I was actually supposed to do horse therapy last year, and I never got around to doing it because the couple of appointments that I had, I was not feeling good at the time, and I couldn't go. And so, but I really would. I think that would be great.
Yeah. Emerald says, I hear you guys, flashbacks are so hard. Right. They really are. Thank you for validating that. Um,
I don't know if this is the right time to say this, but I want to tell everybody something that they might be able to think about. It's something that I have come to realize with what I have dealt with. There are very few people. Well, I shouldn't say there's very. I don't want to say there's very few people that understand, but there is a lot of people that don't understand that can be around you when you're going through these things. A lot of people that maybe are in your lives and that you know that don't understand what you're going through. And as human beings, something that we can do to help others is to be thoughtful and to think about other people and what they're going through and how we can help them during that time or how we can try to understand what they're going through because so many times we can see what somebody goes through and judge them or whatever, but if we just take a moment and try to understand what they went through and try to understand where they're coming from, it can make such a difference.
yeah. I think, like, also, like, I want to add to that, when you go and you start supporting survivors of trauma, number one, the number one thing that you can do is you can empower them to be able to take control of their own life. And when you do that, they are able to feel like a whole valid human being. They are able to learn bodily autonomy. They are able to learn that they are able to say no. They are able to learn and recognize red flags in relationships.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
Somebody says, I was told by a counselor to read the book Our Body Remembers. That was an eye opener. Another book that some people find benefit from is The Body Holds Trauma. If you've never heard of it, It's on Amazon, I think. We love you, Ada. And then
Thank you.
here's a really good point. Being raised in a world where love is transactional, we can't make good choices. So how do we learn to make good choices when we're raised in a world where love is transactional?
Become more self-aware.
Also by practicing making choices.
Yes.
Because I don't know about you, but I knew that if like my stepfather said that I was supposed to do blah 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 blah, that's what I was supposed to do. If he told me how to wrote enigme, then that's what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
So,
Up until I left home, I had to do what Dad and Mom said.
yep. So when people come out of situations like that, how do we support them? And I think based on everything I have learned about trauma and everything I have learned about myself, my own life experiences, and what people have shared with me is when you get people who exit a community like that or who exit a situation like that where they haven't had the ability to make decisions for themselves, the very first thing you can do is give them every single opportunity that you can to make decisions for themselves. You do not make decisions for them. You do not tell them where to go. You do not tell them what to do. The only time that I would deviate from that is when somebody's life is at stake.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
Other
Just
than
be there to
that,
support.
you do not have to agree with the choices or decisions that these people are making when they exit a community like that. You do not have to agree with them. You really don't. I support people every day that make decisions that aren't decisions that I would probably make.
Right.
Probably because I've had a whole different life experience and probably because I see the world a whole different way than they do. But does it mean that either of our ways is wrong? No. It simply means that I need to walk with them where they are and accept them where they are, and also build them up so that they are able to analyze and critically think and ask them questions about how can I best support you? What makes you feel better when you're feeling this way?
Yes.
Like that's really important. What are some red flags? What are the things that affect you? And I think we as parents can really teach our children to be able to critically think. We can encourage that. And we can also do that for people that come out of these communities and out of these abusive situations, regardless of
Absolutely.
what group of people it's from.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm not sure what we were talking about, Emerald Thunder. If you can remind me, says I think that hits the nail on the head. Hashtag trauma bonding. Yeah, yeah. It seems if all someone knew were abusive men, and unfortunately they tend to be attracted to those type of men. Not always the case, of course, but I see it a lot. Well, part of it is like if abuse is all you've ever known, do we have the capability of, or do we have the tools and the skills to be able to identify something is abusive? Did you have those skills, Ada?
Well, I think for me, what I have recognized in myself and the reason that I made the choices I made was I was so desperate for love.
Mm-hmm.
I was miserable. I was always felt unloved. I felt like I was a nobody. I felt like I was never going to be anything. And kind of like my daughter's dad, kind of like the first guy that kind of really paid me attention and whatever. I mean, I didn't realize that wasn't love.
Yeah.
And so that was what I ended up with. And then, I went through a bad relationship with him. I was physically abused by him some and mentally abused, verbally abused, and I finished that relationship and here was this other guy which was my son's dad and he said all the right things. All of the right things. and made me feel like $1,000. I mean, $1,000. Wow, that's not even much. Wow.
Are you trying to say he made you feel like
Yeah,
$1,000,000?
that was what I was trying to say. He made me feel like $1,000,000. And the next thing I knew, I was in an over 13-year relationship with him. And he was never really physically abusive, but he was a drunk, and he was,
Oh.
I mean, I went through hell with him. And I really truly believe, for me, it was just that need for love. That was that I have not felt this love, but then it wasn't the right kind of love. It wasn't really love.
Mhm. And you weren't necessarily able to identify that
Yeah. I mean,
you
how can I identify what love is if I have never really been loved by a man, I mean,
or even if like your familial relationships have been based on transactional love more so than like love for who you are.
right. I will say that, I never doubted the love of my mother. My mother
Mhm.
was not perfect. But I never doubted her love, and I felt love from a couple
Mhm.
of my sisters, and a few of the older, a couple maybe of the older brothers. But like I said, there was 13 of us, so there was a bunch. But yeah, for the most part, I felt very not a part of the family. I didn't feel like I was a part of the family. I was the black sheep. I still am, for that matter. But and I've gotten to where I'm okay with that. But
You're in good company. I'm also a
right,
black sheep. Yeah. Well,
yeah,
I always say I'm the black rainbow sheep of the family. So here we are. Um,
yeah,
Susie says I put our daughter in horse therapy and it was great in the healing process. Yes, I've heard that from several people that horse therapy has been really good.
yeah.
Um, Another blessings to you ladies. I gotta go and be with the family. Oh, hope you enjoy your family. Blessings to you too. I think that making decisions for ourselves helps us to become increasingly self-aware.
Absolutely.
Yes. I one I agree.
Yep.
Something about becoming attached to our abusers through being traumatized, Stockholm syndrome, that's all that I remember. Well, the thing is abusers don't abuse 100% of the time, and that's something that people fail to understand. It's like sometimes abuse can go in cycles where it's like, and it may not even go in order, like a specific order, but like abusers can do something one day that makes you feel like they actually genuinely care about you. And the next day, they're abusing you.
Yeah. Yep.
And then that causes like all of these conflicting feelings inside of you. And especially when you're a kid and you don't have words for it and you don't have anywhere to go and you don't have support. And, there's no way that leads to safety for you. Like that really, yeah. Black sheep of the world, unite.
Woohoo. Hey, you know
You
what?
got this. We're
I
doing it.
I always really struggled, and still as an adult, and even my dad doesn't live in it, neither of my parents are alive anymore. And um I still struggle with it that, as far as I know, as far as I remember, my dad never abused me.
Mm-hmm.
As far as not in that way.
Mm-hmm.
There was a few beatings I got that I probably shouldn't have got. But before I was born, and I'm not, going to talk much about this, it's not my story to tell, but there were others that he did. And there were stories that I have heard that would just absolutely make your skin crawl. And so I always had this, he was my dad. And because I did not have those exact experiences and I didn't really know about them as a little girl, he was my dad. So I always had somewhat of a love for him.
Mm-hmm.
But then as an older woman, I would hear things that he did and it would make me sick. Every time I would feel love, then I would also have this feeling of sickness.
Turns your stomach, doesn't it?
Yeah, like how could you even feel love for somebody like that? And honestly, I'm not going to lie, I still struggle with that. Um, I don't know, I think it's something that you probably always struggle with when you've been through a situation like that,
Well,
that sometimes you wonder.
it's really confusing, and it's also a big deal to like navigate through those conflicting emotions. But both of those things can be true. It can be true that he wasn't abusive in that way towards you. It can also be true that he didn't necessarily like he had moments where he made you feel like he really cared about you.
Yeah, my favorite thing that I used to do with him was when, I was the youngest, so we would go to town together sometimes. And so that was, you know, the few times when, we'd be able to go to town and he would get something to eat, like an ice cream cone or, we didn't get things like that.
Hmm.
And
But then to
yeah,
learn about the things that he did and the things that you hear about what he did to other children,
yeah,
that can also make your stomach turn.
it does. It does.
Exactly. Like those feelings are valid, all of them.
Yeah.
So, anyways, regardless, going back to like our whole topic, we're about to wrap this up. Uh, I wanted to like talk about this part real quick on this list of 10 things. It talks about like teaching children their rights and educating yourself. Like, know what child abuse is, know the signs of child abuse, report abuse, and invest in kids. And teach, like, when they talk about teaching children their rights, they're talking about teaching children they have the right to be safe. When they are taught that they have the right to be safe, children are less likely to believe that abuse is their fault, even if abuse happens. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I'll put a link in the comments for y'all so y'all can go read that if you want more information about that specific article. It's just kind of like a helpful tool and tips for like parents. But I think I'd ask you before we go, is there anything you would say to either children who are in situations like the one that you were in, or, even parents? Like, what would you say to them?
Um, for children, I think
Yeah.
I would just want to encourage them, if they're in that situation, to reach out, even if it seems impossible and it seems nothing is going to change. And if you reach out to somebody that doesn't help you, don't give up. Reach out to someone else and know that there are those of us out here who will stand in between for you. And don't allow anybody to bully you into shutting up, because you have the right to speak. No one, not one single soul on this earth, has the right to touch you inappropriately or where you do not want them to do so. No one. And if that happens, speak up. There are a lot of us out here. And don't let anyone make you feel like it's your fault, because it's not. It's not your fault. And for anybody that has ever been through this, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you went through it. And I'm sorry that nobody listened, because you deserve that. And don't be ashamed to get help. If you've been through it, don't let anybody make you feel like you're less than because you're having issues in life. because everybody has issues. Some of them just can't admit to it. It's okay to have issues. It's okay to deal with your trauma. It's okay to get help. Don't be scared to do so. And listen to your children. You brought your children into the world. They deserve your love. They deserve to be taken care of. They deserve to be listened to. They deserve to know that they are worthy. And they deserve to know that they're loved, and they deserve to be taught to love themselves and care about themselves enough not to allow somebody to treat them that way. And be kind. Just be kind. Kindness is so underrated. You can make such a difference in someone's life by doing just a small, kind deed. So, yeah, just be kind. Listen to your kids. Don't be scared. Don't be scared to stand up. Don't be scared to stand up when people are trying to bully you. Have a voice. Let it be heard. You're not the only one.
Thank you, Ada. Thank you. Thank you so much. That is very, very true. I would add to that. Your voices are valid. Your voices are powerful. And you don't deserve this. If this is what you're living with, you didn't deserve this. No child asked for this. And as parents, listen to your children, like Ada said, hear them, hear their cries. When they tell you something is wrong, hear them, believe them. If somebody discloses to you that they experienced child sexual abuse or child abuse, believe them. Tell them you believe them. Let them know you're in their corner. Don't go blabbing their story around the world for everybody to know. It is not your place to do so. That is their story. Hold their story sacred. Hold it and walk with them and believe them. And believe in them when they don't believe in themselves. And be with
Absolutely.
them and take care of yourself so that you can walk with them, so that you can be with them, so that you can believe them, so that you can help them find a way to safety. Because here's the thing, every child deserves safety. I don't care what community that child lives in, every child deserves safety. And safety for children is a community thing, it is a society thing, it is a worldwide thing. And until we all join forces and work on providing safety for our children, we will not accomplish the goal of safety for all children. So I'd ask you today, what have you done and what are you doing? Are you elevating the voices of survivors of child abuse? Are you elevating the voices of survivors of child sexual abuse? Are you talking about the things that we have discovered through research that help children find safety if they are experiencing abuse? Are you reporting it? Just remember that your choices matter. You can make a difference by one simple move. You can make a difference. And with that being said, I'd like to thank our Patreon subscribers. I'd like to thank the Misfit Amish, and of course, all of you, our listeners, our commenters. I appreciate you. I hope y'all have a beautiful Sunday evening, and we'll see y'all next time.